And hello, Hearts of Oak. Thanks so much for joining us once again. It's great to have someone who's popped up on my screen a fair bit recently, and that is Andrew Kolvet. Andrew, thank you so much for your time today.
Pleasure to be with you. Happy to be here.
Thanks so much. And obviously you're the executive producer of the Charlie Kirk Show, which is possibly why people have had you pop up on their screen. And you're also spokesman for Turning Point USA. And I've seen you on different programs discussing TPUSA and their involvement and role in all different areas in terms of the battles that we are facing, not only in the US for free speech, but worldwide. But maybe, Andrew, I can just ask you to introduce yourself a little bit. You're there on the West Coast. People know you from the Charlie Kirk Show, Turning Point USA. Maybe give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm actually a born and raised Nevada boy, fifth generation Nevada ranchers. So I come from cowboys and ranchers stock very proudly. I call myself a refugee in the People's Republic of California. I happen to marry a California girl, and we've got people taking care of our kids and in-laws and family members, so it works out. And I travel a lot for my work, so here we are. But my background is I went to school at University of Washington. So if you're American, that's the Huskies. Had a great time in Seattle. Then ended up living in the UK for a bit, living in Kenya for a bit on a mission trip, and then headed to Los Angeles, where I was involved in Hollywood and got into producing and then marketing film and TV projects. Worked for Mark Burnett, a pretty well-known TV producer, another Brit, and we ended up, he's well-known for The Voice and Celebrity Apprentice and Shark Tank and Survivor, a lot of great properties. And then he started launching faith-based content, and sort of looked around the room and who here is a Christian? And so I got the call and helped him launch some of his Christian programming, faith-based programming. Some of your viewers might remember the Bible series, which was kind of one of the first of its kind. And then he did AD, The Bible Continues on NBC, and then Ben-Hur. And I was sort of tasked with doing a lot of the PR and marketing and church relationship building for those projects. And it was a wild ride. Some of the most fulfilling career years that I can look back to. And we did a lot of great work, but then we launched a PR company, and me and Mark's chief of staff at the time, and kind of the rest is history. At that point, we ended up, I worked right with PragerU, The Blaze, and Turning Point USA, and then eventually Charlie kind of, asked to have me a little bit more hands-on, dedicated time, liked the opportunity, loved what Turning Point was doing. And then Charlie and I launched the Charlie Kirk Show in 2019, May 1st, 2019. And now it's it's a top 50 podcast in the States. And I think, as of right now talking to you, I think it's number 7 in all of Apple News podcasts. And so the growth has been tremendous. We took it to nationally syndicated radio in 2020, October of 2020, so just before that election. And then we joined Real America's Voice simulcasting right after Steve Bannon's War Room in, I believe, July of 2022. But it's just been an absolute rocket ship and a wild ride. And obviously a lot of that is due to Charlie and his way of phrasing things, his way of challenging the culture, all the activism that we do through Turning Point USA. So it's created a really, I would say, symbiotic relationship between the activism side and the media side. And it's been an absolute pleasure to be a part of, and truly a wild ride.
Download the Getter app right now. It's totally free. It's where I put up exclusively all of my content 24 hours a day. You want to know what Steve Bannon's thinking? Go to Getter.
So don't wait. Download the Getter app now.
Sign up for free and be part of the movement.
No, and the juggernaut that is Turning Point USA and the impact it's had on the Charlie Kirk Show, and we'll get into all of that. But an American doing mission in Kenya, that's not in most America's tick box. A little bit about that. I mean, I did 2 years after my uni with InterVarsity, working the student movement in Bulgaria, and it's always good to take time out and see if you can actually input somewhere completely different and not in your own backyard. But maybe let's know a little bit about what that was, doing mission work in Kenya.
Yeah, well, so I grew up Catholic. I still love the Catholics. My dad was a lectern. I went to a church. I went to a Catholic high school. I would say that's probably where my faith journey kind of really started to begin. It was in high school, searching, asking questions. We had a great priest there, Father Chuck, who would listen to me ask, crazy questions, and then ended up going to University of Washington, where I got saved in my dorm room freshman year, reading my Catholic Bible that I had brought with me from high school, but it was I was reading a sociology book called The Rise of Christianity, which was assigned reading at the time because Rodney Stark, the author, he was in the sociology department at the University of Washington. He ended up he was widely regarded as the leading religious sociologist in the world. At the time, he ended up at my sophomore year going over to University of Baylor and running the sociology department there, but because he was on faculty, it was assigned reading, as is often the case. And so I was reading that book and sparked a couple questions about some of the verses. It was just about how the faith spread through the Roman Empire. So I dusted off my Catholic Youth Bible and started reading. And before I knew it, in the course of a night, I had read the Gospel of John. And then I read Book of Acts, and then from there it was kind of like, well, what do I do now? Because I think I, at some point in the course of reading those two books, realized that I believed, and it was an amazing moment. In college, I think the image you have in your head is that you're going to go party and go to kegers, and that's certainly the image I sort of had in my head. And right when I got to school in a very liberal city, Seattle is the second least church city in America behind San Francisco. Here I was becoming a Christian in Seattle, and that sparked my faith journey. And college was really marked for me, just exploring that. Some might know Mark Driscoll was in Seattle at the time, and so there was a lot of action just in and around Seattle. Whatever you think of Mark, he was leading a lot of young men to Christ as well. So I remember I visited his church a number of times. There was a Presbyterian church at school. Anyways, it was a great experience. And for whatever reason, I just got plugged in with the more Protestant evangelical groups that were more active on campus at the time. And so by the time I graduated, I wanted to go put my faith into action somewhere else. I don't know why that was the mission in my head, but I went to Africa. And ironically, I spent about 8 months in Spain. I'd spent a couple long stays in Cyprus. My mother and stepdad are archaeologists, and they had a dig site through University of Nevada, Las Vegas in Cyprus. So I on multiple summers, spent time over there. Lived in the UK for a bit, like I said, and then I lived in Kenya. And great mission work. Amazing to see their faith. Amazing to see just how pure it is, and presume continues to be. Working with the Maasai people, there was actually a political uprising in Kenya at the time, where the most populous tribe had been in power for 40 years, and polling was suggesting that the second most populous tribe was about to win the election. Some funny business happened, and riots and protests happened as a result on the back end of that. And so my job quickly became sort of documenting the UN camps, the food distribution, and all of those types of things. And it was very fascinating, very interesting. I learned a ton, but it left me with a real strong desire. But I mentioned all that traveling. It left me with a really strong desire to build and thrive where I was from. I missed home like you can't imagine. after all of that. I'd lived out of a suitcase for so long. Even college felt like living out of a suitcase. And all I wanted to do at the end of that trip was get home and build and really make America great, right? In my small way. So that is my journey. I sort of had to go walkabout. I look at all those years and I think about them as a time when I relearned to love America. I think my experience was like a lot of young kids, where you hear about the food in Europe or the way they do things in other places, and you just assume that your home is somehow backwards or doing it wrong. And I left, and I mean, it was years away when you count it all together. And by the time I was done, I just desperately wanted. I missed home. I loved home. I realized what I had been blessed with, to be an American, to be born in this country, and I couldn't. I was just excited to get started, and so that was kind of that journey. And the way my career has gone, the way different things have fallen for me, I think I've had an opportunity to do that, and I'm grateful for it.
Well, certainly, I want to pick up on the faith element, and I think it's important to travel and to see what happens elsewhere in other countries, and then you understand where you are in your home and where that fits in. But I want to ask you, Student Action Summit, you just had that in Turning Point USA, and I've just, Mo Bannon, I've just actually been on with her, doing another interview with her, and she was one of the speakers there. Maybe tell us a little bit about the role of conferences like that, Student Action Summit. I know many other TPUSA conferences, but that one's just finished. Maybe give us your thoughts on that, which just happened weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, it was an incredible success. I'm so proud of the team, and it was the biggest student action summit we've ever hosted. We also do America Fest, AmFest in December in Phoenix at the convention center there, and I think in December that was 21,000 people. Obviously, we just won the election. We had President Trump. There was a lot of great energy. But this, as far as Student Action Summit, which is much more of a student focus, having 7,000 people come to that was just tremendous. I mean, it was huge. It was so much energy, and it was coming, I think, at a really critical time where you've got this Epstein story coming up. You've got we're just off the heels of the Iran-Israel conflict. President Trump was talking about Ukraine and what we're going to be doing there. So there was just a lot going on in the base energy right when we were meeting at Tampa, a lot of questions. And so, the event gets streamed everywhere, from C-SPAN to Fox Nation to Real America's Voice to all over Rumble. I think Rumble, we were the exclusive stream like that entire weekend. The most highlighted stream, and then the clips obviously go viral everywhere. And we had Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Steve Bannon, Tulsi Gabbard, Kristi Noem, head of DHS. We had Tom Homan, border czar. We had Pete Hegseth, Department of Defense secretary. So it's just a massive star-studded event. So many great speakers, so many great speeches that were given. But your first question was, what is the significance of something like the Student Action Summit? Well, it's incredibly significant. So much of our life, especially for Gen Z, is online, is digital. I mean, the show is consumed in that form. So much of our time is spent on a screen. And so when you bring that to IRL, in real life, and you get these kids in an environment where they see other students just like them all across the country that have conservative ideas, that are Christian, that have the same concerns, wants, needs, desires, it puts flesh on the bones of everything that they are thinking, feeling, and believing, and they build relationships that will last a lifetime. So all of that, I mean, it's in our digital world, those in real life moments become more and more precious and more valuable. And I think back to when I was, 15, 16, 17, 18, and we it's kind of like 25 and under, that's the student age that we do it at. if I think back to those years in my life and how formative those were and how incredible an experience, like traveling across the country for a multiple day conference and meeting all those people, the breakouts, the socials, we had like a, Mountain Dew social where they get to dance and it's very clean and just good fun, where they get to kind of be around people that are like-minded. I can't imagine having that type of opportunity at that age. And so in order to be able to provide that to kids and be a part of that experience, and then you combine just the social aspect with the incredible exposure to the best minds in the conservative movement. And you get to see Steve Bannon doing War Room from the floor and Charlie doing the Charlie Kirk Show from the floor and so many others. We had, so many great media partners. I mean, it's a special moment. There's just no doubt about it. And this year was no different. It's tremendously impactful as well because so many of those students will take what they see at that conference and they'll go start a chapter at their university, or they'll get plugged back in with their faith. I mean, there's just so many stories like that. It will encourage you endlessly.
And I'll come back to that focus on the youth, which I think is maybe fairly unique with Turning Point USA in terms of other conservative outlets. But the Turning Point USA story is phenomenal. How I think Charlie was only maybe 18 whenever he launched it. Maybe
18.
13 years ago, 14 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, 2012 he started it. It is basically his parents' garage. It's one of those stories in Lamont, Illinois. And they got sort of like a little one of those addresses that's the building so small it has a half in it. It was the big first jump, and eventually it moved to Phoenix, Arizona, where it's based currently. Yeah,
but because I think people always want to know kind of what's the secret of success. And then when you hear hard work, you lose most of the audience. But it is hard work. It is having a vision, a belief, and actually plugging away at it and not giving up at the first or second hurdle. And seeing where it's come, I think shows that this is the American dream, when you have an ideal, something you work for, and don't give up, whatever setbacks, and keep pushing. And it shows what actually you can building an entity that actually has an impact on the national stage.
Yeah, no, I hard work is, I mean, you can't get away from it, right, Peter? I mean, it's like, I've had the pleasure of working with two truly dynamic principals, right? Mark Burnett, British national, great guy, would keep everybody up all night. I mean, with messages, are you still working on this? You never knew when you were going to get, and it just kind of had that motor, right? And Charlie's the same way. I do tend to think that there is a certain subset of the population that just has this motor, right? That is just doggedly observing, looking, seeing, critiquing himself and the team, driving excellence. A lot of those things have been learned along the way. You don't just wake up one day and you think, oh, I'm gonna start a $100 million a year org, and we're gonna have 600, 700 employees scattered across the country. It's gonna be great and easy. No, I mean, from point zero to where we're at now, it's you just don't know what you're doing when you start. I mean, I've been working with Charlie for I think 7 or 8 years now. And just even in that time, so I wasn't even there during the beginning, the very beginning, but I saw it at a much, much more nascent place. And so, this has been a tremendous work of truly Charlie Kirk. I mean, there's no getting around just what he means to the organization and what the sort of spirit and energy that from the top down that he pushes out through all the staff and all of the efforts and events that we do. And listen, I work so closely with Charlie. I'm probably one of the most honest people with him, so I don't blow smoke. But truly, I can't give him enough credit for how he's gone about doing what he's doing. And by the way, I mean, we have the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows, the setbacks and the achievements and the accomplishment. And you take it from 2020 and J6 and the dark days of Trump being pushed into, political exile, and to, that moment. I don't know if you've seen it, that clip on election night when Fox ends up calling Pennsylvania for President Trump, and it secured the electoral victory. Obviously, we ended up running the table and winning the popular vote, but there's that moment where Charlie just sort of collapses in his chair, and gets a little misty-eyed because we had truly left it all out on the field. We had truly left it out all on the field. And if you are somebody that wants to achieve greatness, that's what it's going to take. I mean, I feel like we didn't stop working from, I mean, like I said earlier, we started our radio show. We took our podcast to broadcast in October of 2020. And I remember feeling in the weeks after the election, like it was the first time that I let whatever that tightness in my, I don't know if it was subconscious or in my stomach and my gut. It was the first time I felt it. I felt finally like I could take a moment and really breathe. But it was, essentially 5 years of just complete and utter dedication to winning our country back and winning back the youth and winning back all of these things that we felt had been taken. And, it was truly exhausting. It was truly exhausting and so worth it, especially given the outcome. But there was a lot of efforts that we put a lot of time and energy in that we didn't get that kind of payoff, but it didn't stop us. And I think that's the key, is knowing that when you're going to start something, that you will have massive setbacks. You will. If you dare great, you dare to lose great. And it's completely worth it. I mean, you think about a world in which Turning Point doesn't exist. You think about a world where we didn't win the youth vote in Michigan and we didn't win in Arizona, where we didn't see the biggest move in young people, where we didn't see almost 2 billion TikTok views of Charlie's debates on campuses. You think about that world and all of those, people like to see the big shiny thing and they think Charlie was like grown in a petri dish by RNC donors. Like, that is completely false. I just can't even tell you. If anything, the RNC tried to kill us like half the time. We got into that big fight with Rana, but before that, it was a simmering feud for years. And they tried to take us down. They tried to take out our donors. These are people on our side. And so, just everything that you overcome, all the haters online, you just can't imagine all the different things. And though this person decide that you're bad for the movement, or you're too obnoxious, you're too loud, you're too confrontational, you're too this, you're too that. You're sucking up the donor dollars. I mean, just imagine everything. We're too friendly with Israel. Whatever. The amount of barriers that are thrown in your way to get from point A to point B is truly remarkable. And I'm really proud of what Turning Point's accomplished. I'm really proud of what we've accomplished at the Charlie Kirk Show. I'm really proud of what Charlie himself has overcome, because he doesn't get enough credit for it. I think people see just what it is now, and they have no perception of what it took, the grit and just the fortitude to get from point A to point B.
That will stay in my head. Charlie Kirk in the RNC petri dish. That will stick with me.
That's what a lot of people think about him. I mean, they think like, oh, you just grow a Charlie Kirk out of nowhere. Like, and you see this actually with what the Democrats are trying to do now. They're trying to spend $20 million to speak to young men, and they've got their Voters of Tomorrow summit that looks just terrible. And they're like, how do you get a Charlie Kirk that can have this activist network with thousands of chapters in high school and colleges across the country, with these huge national events, with this massive social footprint, as well as the media side of the Charlie Kirk Show, as well as Turning Point Action, the C4, we do ballot chasing and door knocking, and we have the app. And I mean, it's like, they're like, oh, we just need to create one of those. It kind of reminds me of like, the left also doing that with Joe Rogan. We need our own Joe Rogan. And it's like, you can't just do these things. You can't just, be like, oh, he's our chosen instrument and you turn him into this thing. No, I mean, Charlie was born by God probably for this exact moment, and who knows what else. And Turning Point, I think, is been protected by God. And the work that we've done, God's been guiding us and protecting us the whole way. There's no doubt. I mean, there's, and so that's the other answer to your original question. When you're talking about origin stories, pray, ask God to help you, and then work. and then move. And there's an old figure of speech, old expression, is that you can't turn a parked car. And so if you are listening to this and your car is parked, you can't get out of the situation you're in. You can only get out if you move forward. Sometimes you got to move back to get forward if you're stuck, but you got to move, and that's the key.
I mean, half of our viewers are US and half are UK, but the whole concept of actually faith being vital and faith in Christ being vital is another step toward for most Brits or Europeans. But in the US, it kind of fits with the psyche and the ethos. But how do you see that faith, that vision, that calling the individual, how does that all fit in? Because what Turning Point USA are doing is maybe a little bit different than the Republican conservative, cultural conservative model. What Turning Point USA are actually calling people to actually following Christ in whatever that means for you. And that is much more blatant, but much more intimate, I think, than the other conservative media. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that comes from, again, Charlie, and I'm a devout Christian. A lot of our leadership is, not all. But we do have a TPUSA faith.
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah, not yet. But I mean, that's what's interesting, right? Because you have Charlie, who, especially, since he's been married, since COVID, since having children, myself, since being married, having kids, our faith drives everything that we do. There's no doubt about it that that is just a critical element. It's always there, whether we're doing something completely disconnected, on the outside from what you see from faith, it's still driving the way that we speak. It's driving the tone. It's driving our turns of phrase. Everything about what we do, I hope and I pray, is anchored and emanating from our faith in Jesus. But, we also do have TPUSA faith, which is something that started right out of COVID, because we saw what was happening with the church. The churches were getting shut down. Liquor stores and pot dispensaries were open, but, the church couldn't meet in person, without defying the state. And so there was this need to be sort of this gathering function, just like we were doing with the events, just like we were doing with AmFest and Student Action Summit. How do we get everybody together? How do we get like-minded pastors all across the country into singing from the same hymnal, if ever that was an appropriate expression? How do we do that? So out of that need to be able to put all these pastors together that wanted to push back at what we felt was tyranny, TPUSA Faith was born. And we realized that if you do not speak into the void, then the secularists are going to. And you see that in the UK. You see that across Europe, where faith is sort of looked on as a dirty throwback to a bygone era, and it should be, properly put in its place and just dusted out for weddings and funerals. And that's not how we see it. No, faith has to drive everything that we do. I mean, if you look at any single issue across the political spectrum, if you are not driving from a place informed by your faith, you will get far afield. You will get far askew from what the original vision of our founders, of our country, of our Constitution is. And I would say the same is true for the UK, that you cannot have a robust, vital, empowered, civic-minded population that is not connected first to God. And I think anywhere you see that, you're seeing our civilization slowly crumble and collapse and get taken over, whether that be through immigration, whether that be through secularism, whether that be through radical communism or socialism, like you see in our country with Sohrab Mamdani. The faith element is so critical. And I mean, I could monologue on that longer, but it's truly, for me, if you don't know where your values are starting from that emanating from, then you are lost. You are lost adrift at sea. And I believe it was Socrates, but it could have been Plato, where it says the politics is the highest form of sociability. And we also have to remember that our morals our laws are all moral statements, right? Every single law that we passed is essentially rooted in a moral statement. Well, where does that morality come from? Well, it's either going to come from your faith or it's going to come from the world.
No, absolutely. Because Turning Point USA kind of started and was there in the Obama regime, and then the Charlie Kirk Show launches in a President Trump time, and then that's snatched away in 2020, and now you're there with the second or third Trump presidency, however you call it. But what is the role of Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk Show in being this new alternative media that actually is really only started since President Trump's first term and is now the driving way of information? How do you kind of fit into that ethos?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I tend to believe that some of the most creative solutions come out of having your back up against the wall, right? I mean, when we started the podcast, it's not like I could call up CNN and say, "Hey, I got this great guy, Charlie Kirk. Can you book him?" No, they would have laughed in my face. As a matter of fact, they did. I tried that because at one point I was, "Hey, let's go challenge them in their places of power. Let's go have these discussions," and it wasn't happening. I mean, Charlie was able to get on Fox News and Fox Business, and that was happening, but really it was how do we own, we have a thing we say sometimes, like, we the media now, right? And what we were able to do is really just ride a wave, right place, right time, but also having the gumption to say, hey, I think we could do this really well. I think we are a voice in this space that's missing right now. And so we just started with the podcast, and man, I mean, we tripped over ourselves in that first year so many times. And at first we were doing one episode a week, and then eventually we went to 2 episodes a week, and then 3 episodes a week. But remember the time frame that we're in. So we started in 2019. In May of 2019, a year later, the world would be shut down because of COVID. Less than a year. And so in that first year, I mean, we were watching the numbers grow. They were growing, but it was, it wasn't astronomical. I mean, it depends. Maybe for a lot of people, it probably would have been, but it wasn't what we wanted yet. We had bigger goals and aspirations. And then what happened was, when the world shut down for COVID and we were not able to do the activism piece, right? We had to cancel our summer student action event. We ended up basically saying, hey, we have nothing to do. Let's go 5 days a week. And then the George Floyd riots in the States happened. And I'll never forget the day that I saw the black squares start showing up on my Instagram account, and just knowing intuitively something was radically off. Something was really, really off. And just being like, this feels coercive. Like, bands were getting canceled if they didn't put it on their like band page. It was you were guilty if you didn't take part in the protests against systemic racism in the United States. Something that I don't believe is even true, that we are systemically racist. Are there racists? Sure. Is there systemic racism? No. Do black neighborhoods want more policing? Yes. Do they benefit from it? Yes. And yet we were supposed to believe this idea that all these police officers are bad people. I just remember getting silently enraged, and I called Charlie, going like, who's the first person that they're going to call when they're in a tight spot? They're going to call the police. They're going to dial 911 and call the police. And yet here they are demonizing these people. Are there bad police officers? Sure. Is the vast majority of them good? Yes, of course. They're there to save your life and to protect you. So I remember just getting quietly, secretly enraged, called Charlie. He was completely the same page. And I was like, I think you need to do like a selfie. You need to do a selfie video. Let's get this out. And he was like, absolutely. So, he puts a selfie video and just rages against the black squares, just rages. And to it's hard even to put your mind back in that place, because we've come so far in the States, at least, against the DEI oppression, against the systemic racism narrative, against all of these things, and now you can sort of speak freely. But Twitter was shut down. There was no free speech on Twitter. Facebook was similar. YouTube was similar. Charlie just went for it and just ripped one of the best all-timers of ever on that selfie video, put it up there, went mega viral. And we just started going 5 days a week, pushing back against COVID lockdowns and against these riots that were taking over the country in all our major cities. And we just saw our audience just ballooned. It just exploded during COVID and during BLM. And, we've never really looked back.
Tell me about getting the vote out, because I think Turning Point USA are becoming feared by the left. And Charlie Kirk Show, it's about engaging people. It's about winning hearts and minds, about cementing people's position who are on your side, winning over others. But it has to be a next step. And one of the main next steps in the West is playing a part in the democratic process. And Turning Point USA has been central to that. Tell us about that, and I guess the pushback whenever you've been seen as a key threat.
Well, you push back from the right or from the left?
Well, from the left, but it could be from the Republican establishment also.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, my it's one of those things where I think at some level I don't even log from my own memory when the left attacks us, because it's just so usual, and so we're just so accustomed to it. When the attacks are from the right, they tend to. They're a little bit more memorable for me, and I'm thinking back to we got into a very public fight with Ronna McDaniel, who was the head of the RNC at the time. A distant memory. I think she still doesn't like us too much, from what I gather. But we were sick of losing, right? And we were watching the Republican establishment simply not get with it. When it came to ballot chasing, and maybe it was one thing. There was two fundamental things that it shifted in the electorate. One, President Trump transformed the party from a high prop, minority party. Essentially, we would be losing in all the polls, and then this is before Trump. We'd lose in the polls, but then on election day, we'd make up the difference because our people would come out and their people would stay home. Just didn't have the voting habits quite as deeply ingrained. But then when Trump came, we ended up getting the low props on our side, and they became the high prop voter. So that's one change, right? So we might be winning the idea war, we might be winning the culture, but when it came to elections, we had this disadvantage, and we still do have that disadvantage, and we need to stay on top of it. So we saw that as a structural deficit we needed to make up for. The second thing that changed was that we went from a single day voting, to this month-long early voting model. A lot of that exploded during COVID, but what we realized was that you are a fool if you are not investing a ton of money in raising awareness and then cashing in those ballots that are being mailed to people's homes. It became a game about how many pieces of paper can you get in the box. That's the whole thing. That's it. It's not about even persuasion anymore. And Joe Biden, yes, I believe that election was full of shenanigans, and you said it was snatched from us. I think that's a great way to say it. But really, he proved that you can stay in your basement and hold rallies in front of like 4 people, and get pieces of paper in the box. That's what he proved. We could dissect 2020 in 1,000 different ways, but what he proved is you can get pieces of paper in the box, you win. Problem was with the donor class on the Republican side, the conservative side, they weren't compelled by that. That's not in their muscle memory. That's not the way that we've done things. That's not the way that we've asked for money. They want to cut a check, write some snazzy ads, see it on TV, and send it to their friends and be like, haha, look at this ad I made. And they want to do it like, in the 4th week of October with election 1 week out. That does nothing in our current model. What does help is investing 2 years out, investing 18 months out, hiring the staff, training the staff, building relationships with people on the ground, and building an army of ballot chasers. And so that's what we did through Turning Point Action. And I like to look at Arizona because that was the throw it all at the wall test case, right? We were also massively involved in Wisconsin statewide. We were also involved in Michigan 7, Nevada 3. But Arizona was where we threw the kitchen sink at it, right? Where we emptied the clip. We unloaded everything we had. Hopefully we'll have even more in the future because we're going to keep building. But I mean, we had, thousands of people on the ground, and we gave them territories, and we gave them we built an app that tracked all their progress and helped keep track of their contacts and was their ballot in, and we were cross-referencing that with the Secretary of State's office. And there was a New York Times article that came out after the election that checked our work. The same reporter had come out in April of 2024, and then he came out I believe in December. And he wanted to check our work, and basically he summed it up that there was 315,000 first-time and low-propensity voters that voted in Arizona for President Trump that did not show up in 2020. That's 315,000. And what was the results? Trump ends up carrying a state he lost by 10,000. He carried it by, I believe, about 200,000. And it was the best performing swing state. We won it by over 5.5 points in 2024. So that's the power of messaging combined with on the ground boots on the ground, an army of ballot chasers, and with a lot of focus, a lot of sophistication. And so that's the message. That's the model that we want to bring to other swing states, to other competitive races that we have to win.
Can I ask you one thing that popped up on, and I've kind of engaged with Steve about this and talking to Maureen Bannon about this is, and it kind of rears head a little bit at the Student Action Summit, having Steve speaking, having Tucker speaking, and it's this kind of America first v. Israel first, and it's perplexing to me, someone who I'll call myself a Christian Zionist, and I see the biblical history, the 3,000-year history of Jerusalem and God's hand on that and biblical prophecy, but yet there's a confusion of criticizing the Israeli government, and that's regarding as this kind of Jew hatred. And it's a weird concept that I'm trying to understand where the split comes from. But I just want to end off on that because it's kind of reared its head a little bit from that conference. I think it's a fight that actually you don't really need to have. If you live in America, you're for America. You can, of course, have Israel as Israel second, and part of that, a lot of that will come from faith and biblical history, and also from it's better to have Israel in the Middle East than not Israel. That's common sense. But yeah, your thoughts on that, that kind of argument that's appeared.
Yeah, I mean it's a massive question. You just and I love that you're like, this is not at all I don't get what the controversy. I was thought while you're asking that, I'm thinking you're so British. You're so you're so the Commonwealth, common sense, man. And yes, you would think some of this is common sense, but there is a growing generational divide that has emerged between, I would say, and to use inexact language, apologies, boomers, but like the boomer evangelical way of looking at Israel versus a Gen Z Catholic Protestant way of looking at Israel. Part of that's theological, right? There is this question and a debate. The Catholics find themselves on one side, the dispensationalists find themselves on one side about what is Israel. A part of it is just the reality that they're seeing on they're seeing on social media. There's very loud voices that are spewing Jew hate, and it's very loud. It's very prevalent. And not only are you seeing it from the left, but you're seeing it from voices that would say that they are part of the right. They're very identitarian, though, and they're very fixated on Israel. I mean, you could say that, you had a toothache, and they'd probably respond in the chat saying it was the Jews. I mean, that's how virulent and dumb and just the brain rot is tremendous. And so a lot of our students at Turning Point USA are seeing all of those messages. It's definitely getting through. And then I would say, candidly, there is a part of it where Israel's just been really bad at PR after October 7th. Part of that I understand, that they had this traumatic event happen. Their 9/11 on steroids, or whatever the way that they frame it, I think is fair when you look at population size and you think about how many people actually died in October 7th, and just the barbarism of it. I mean, certainly. And so I understand some of the reaction, and then of course you see this campus protest movement across the world, really, but in the United States, certainly. And Jews are starting to realize, like, hey, there's a lot of people that we just got attacked, and they seem to hate us more. Like, what happened to the sympathy, for losing 1,200 people, almost 1,300, and all the hostages? And I think what that ended up doing is it created a paranoia with our friends in Israel, our Jewish friends in the States, where they feel attacked even when they're not getting attacked. And then there was pressure put on evangelical circles, on political leaders, to try and nip this stuff in the bud, and that just doesn't work in a social media environment. When you start trying to coerce speech, even if you're coming from a place that I can agree with, I can't agree with the methods. If you're trying to say that, criticizing the Israeli government is anti-Semitic, maybe you don't do that, Peter, but a lot of people in the United States do, that are coming from a good place. They tend to be evangelicals. They tend to be political leaders. They're trying to pass anti-free speech legislation from these are Republicans. We're supposed to be free speech warriors. They're passing legislation to protect Jews from anti-Semitism, but in practice, it's really anti-free speech legislation. And so there just becomes this cognitive dissonance that emerges, where you're like, hey, we're America first. We're nationalist, populist, conservatives. We're, MAGA, whatever but yet Israel gets all these carve-outs, and so young kids are starting to say, well, okay, I don't believe in that brain rot, that Jew hatred stuff, but like I am, like, why are we passing anti-free speech laws for them? Like, I can burn the American flag. Why can't I burn the Israeli flag? Why can I boycott, California or Tennessee, but I can't boycott, so there becomes this, I think, an issue where we have to look at our own side of the house and say, are we doing this the best way? And I believe it comes from a false binary that we're presenting young people with. And that's, you're either for us or you're against us. You're either pro-Israel or you're anti-Semitic. And that's just simply not what kids are resonating with. That's pushing them away. And we did a poll at the Student Action Summit where we found out that 73% of students consider themselves pro-Israel. But then we ended up doing a focus group. Charlie and I led it. I actually did an interview last night with Batya Ungar-Sargon on News Nation about this focus group. She saw the clip, and she thought it was fascinating. She's Jewish, and she really resonated with what a lot of the kids in this focus group were saying, and that's that, like, I feel like I'm guilty of a crime even though I haven't committed it. But and they're likening it to being called a racist when they're not actually racist, right? We went in the United States, we went through the whole DEI regime. Now we're pushing back on that, thankfully. But all these kids have been called pejoratives and bad names their whole lives because they're conservatives. They've been called racist and fascist and Nazis. And here they are. Just add another one. They're being called anti-Semitic if they dare ask the question. And again, you don't phrase it that way, but there are people that do, and there are power players in the United States that will. And that, I think, is part of the problem. You can support Israel's right to exist and to support their right to defend themselves, as I certainly do. I love Israel. I consider myself staunchly pro-Israel and pro-Jews. However, if you want to ask questions about military-industrial complex, about when Israel needs America to step in and help defend itself, or in the case of the Israel-Iran situation, where we actually took an offensive posture and dropped those bombs on the nuclear facilities in Iran. So those are shades of gray. Those are areas and degrees of nuance and difference that you should be allowed to have, and not be smeared or not be castigated for wrongthink. I think that the more that we create a third way, a better way that incorporates nuance, that incorporates and here's the key. These kids if you're 21 years old, President Trump has been in the political scene basically since you were forming intelligible memories, right? So he has completely reshaped the electorate. Not only did he make us the low prop party and with union guys cheering us, he also made us a nationalist, populist, America first party. These kids want to make sure that we're putting their country first. And they feel like they've been dog walked into constantly defending Israel. And they're sick of it, candidly. They might like Israel. They might love Israel. They might understand that it's beneficial for the United States to have Israel as a staunch ally in the Middle East and to gather intelligence and to be this source of civilization in a sea of terrorists, in the case of Hamas, that actually want to kill them, or Hezbollah. And so they get all that. But the messages that we need to dress that with need to change, and we need to not be offending. Our friends need to not be so offended at their friends, whether that's Charlie or myself, when we critique these items. Because there is a third way. There is a way that these kids will embrace the importance of Israel without becoming anti-Semitic or anti-Israel. They just need to be given permission to say, hey, we have a different philosophy about the role of America in foreign policy, and there's some valid arguments that they have. Some of them we need to push back and make sure they understand the critical importance of our allies, whether that be Israel or in other parts of the country, other parts of the world. But we need to hear them because it's coming from a good place. It's genuine. It's good-hearted. It's good faith.
Andrew, I knew it would be a lot to pack into 45 minutes, and I really appreciate you giving us an overview of Turning Point USA, of the political side, of the media side, of engaging with a new generation. I think it's so vital. So thanks so much for your time today.
It's a pleasure. It's been fun. Thank you for having me.